Okay, so this is going to be the next video where we're going to make a simple animal using our simple transform tools, and we're also going to look at the extrusion tool as one of the important sculpting tools. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete this object from the last video. I'm going to create a new primitive cube, and we're going to treat this like it's a lump of clay, and we're going to imagine that everything we pull out of this cube. The reason we want to do that is because we want to have a uniform shell to our object. We don't want to have this as a body and then create, say, like a sphere that's the head, and then sort of stick that onto the body, because these are kind of two different, entirely different forms. They're not connected, and they have overlapping geometry inside. So whenever we sculpt things, it's a good rule of thumb just to pull them all out of one object to retain a uniform outer shell that has no kind of bits and pieces inside it. That's also very, very important for 3D printing. So if you want to 3D print any object you have here, you need to have the uniform outer shell completely closed. Another little thing that I need to mention about the camera controls is that if you press spacebar on the keyboard, you get this 4 split view. One is the perspective view, one is the side view, one is the front view, and one is the top view. This can be useful for modeling, and you can hit spacebar back on any of those to go back into them. Okay, now what we're going to do is sculpt a basic animal, and to do that we need more information inside this cube in order to sculpt it. Another thing to remember is that when we're making these discrete individual objects, we always want to start it at 0, 0, 0 coordinates. The other reason for that is that I'm going to be mirroring the two sides of the object, so it's good to have it split absolutely down the middle on the z-axis here. So to create more information inside this cube to start with, we want to go to the there's two important tabs here. There's the channel box tab and the attribute editor. We're going to stay in the channel box here. We're going to click on the inputs of the polycube 1, and we're going to add some subdivisions. I'm going to add 4 to each axis, as long as there's one that runs down the middle. So we're going to start. If you think about everything here as like a data structure, this is an object that has some mesh information attached to it. These inputs are like pieces of mesh information that attach to this object when we're thinking about it in a kind of a data structure way rather than a visual or sort of arty kind of way. And you can see in the attribute editor there's all the different kind of inputs that go into this data structure to make it appear as it is. There's a structure for the mesh, there's this kind of other modifier information, we've got shading for its appearance, and a material input to tell it how it reacts to the light. So every kind of thing we model has these inputs, and this is very important. This is kind of how it works in Unity as well. So anyway, we've just changed some information on one of its inputs here. That's its subdivisions, and there are other ways to subdivide the cube. We'll look into those a bit later. And we're going to pull legs and stuff out of this. But before we do that, we're going to mirror the object. So what I want you to do, there are other ways to do this. There is a mirroring tool, but I don't do it that way. I was taught to do it this way. I'm going to remember to right click to get your wheel up. I'm going to select face. I'm going to select exactly half of the box, and to do that I'm going to go to the front view here. That's space bar to go out and space bar to go in to the view. I'm just going to select exactly half and delete it. Hit space bar again, space bar to go back. Now we have half a cube here. What we're now going to do is make a duplicate of this half of the cube that is an instance of the original half. Not a copy, but an instance. A copy would mean that I copy it over and it stays the same way no matter what I do to this. An instance means that any changes I make to this side also happen to this side. So to make that mirroring copy, that instance, we're going to go to Edit up here and Duplicate Special. Don't click on it yet. Many of the commands in the Maya menus have something next to it called the options box. We're actually going to click on the options box to give us more options for this command, the duplicate special command. The important thing here is that instead of making a copy, we're making an instance. We don't want it to be a child of the parent. In our kind of hierarchy, we're just going to copy it to the world. And the important thing here is that we need to scale it negative on one of these axes so that it's flipped. And I believe that that is the Z axis, so I'm going to make that -1, and that's correct. If you have split it down a different axis, say you selected this half of the object, say this half, and you split it that way, you'd need to make it negative on the Z instead. So please make sure, because this middle bit here is going to be like the middle of like the spine of the animal, and this is going to be like under the belly. It needs to face forward, so that blue arrow needs to be forward because its head's going to come out this way. So make that special duplication so that anything, if I say select a face here and I manipulate that, the same thing is going to happen to the other instance. Same as if I selected the face on this side, that's going to happen there. Now, in case you forgot for last time, we're moving between object mode, which is when it's green, and selecting the individual components. We actually have two objects here, so you're going to sometimes need to go to object mode to get into the different side, and then go into like edge select or vertex select or face select to make changes. So I'm wanting to now make this into some sort of animal. I'm going to squash it a little bit. That doesn't affect both, so I'm going to select both like that and just sort of squash it and make it a bit thinner. And now I'm going to create some legs by going to the face select. I'm going to select shift select two different leg areas, and now I'm going to introduce to you the extrusion tool. So we're going to go into our edit mesh menu and go extrude. Now don't click anything yet. It doesn't look like anything's happened, but if we pull this arrow, ta-da, we have an extrusion. It's created some other faces out of those original faces. Now this is a very, very important thing to remember. if you go to Edit Mesh Extrude, you clicked it once, you unclick, you've clicked somewhere else, you start working on a different part of the object, what you haven't realized is that there is actually an extrusion here. You've just extruded it and left it. And so it looks like there's nothing there, but there are actually extra faces in there. That's a really, really important mistake that people will make when they're modeling. They forget that this extra face information is here, and they keep modeling, and then when it goes to skinning it or adding lighting, it looks funny because of the strange mesh data that's inside there. So I'm just undoing my extrusion. Undo, undo, undo. As soon as you extrude, you must pull it. So it's like Edit Mesh Extrude, or you can also press Control E. So I'm going to press Control E. If it's Mac, it would be Command E. Control E, immediately pull. Control E, immediately pull. Don't Control E, click off somewhere else and do something else. You could also pull it sideways, but it would look weird. You wouldn't want to do that. Immediately pull. Okay? You can also do this another way. You can go Edit Mesh Extrude and click on the Options box, and you can say instead of having one division, you could have 3 divisions and extrude it, and you would get 3 evenly spread extrusion divisions. Okay? So you can do that for some legs. I'm going to make some legs here. It's going to be I'm going to actually scale them just to sort of move them in a bit. I'm like feet. Some chubby looking legs. Maybe it's not a dog, maybe it's something else. I don't know yet. Okay, and then I'm going to... Okay, so the next important thing here is we've got some legs. We want to start making it look a bit more organic and start to sculpt this into a more realistic shape. A lot of people will do this. They'll press 2 on the keyboard, and you get this lovely smooth looking object. Do not use number 2 on the keyboard. That's just pressing 2 on the keyboard. Do not use this for sculpting. This does not translate into Unity. It will not look like this when you put it into Unity. It will only look like this. So that's number 1 on the keyboard to go back to the kind of geometric view. 2 for smooth shading, 1 for geometric. You have to make it look as organic as possible using the geometric view, not the smooth shading view. Okay? Because Unity won't smooth shade it. So what we have to do is you have to kind of I start by sort of selecting the edges and then kind of using my basic translate tool to kind of start smoothing that out. I could select these in the side and sort of move those out. It is just checking that it's doing it to both sides. I've accidentally selected more than one. I'm using the Shift Select to kind of select more than one edge at once. You have to kind of look at this as a kind of a problem-solving task. You need to sort of look at it and go, which edges will I have to select to affect an area in a certain way? Sometimes it's best to select edges, sometimes it's better just to select single vertices. It's kind of a little bit of a problem-solving task that you'll get a handle for as you go. We want to make these legs look a little bit more organic, so I'm going to pull those in. If I had a little bit more mesh data here, I could make it look smoother. I might do that actually. You can. So I'm going to introduce to you the edge loop tool. Mesh tools, insert edge loop, will allow you to create a running loop that runs through a set of faces. Now that's kind of distorted a little bit how evenly spread out everything is, but I can use my vertex selection to kind of, now I've got that kind of extra information, I can make it look a bit smoother. Maybe I want the little feet to be a bit smaller. Oops. And you can keep going until it looks more organic. If you want to select a whole edge loop, you're going to double click on an edge loop and it will select the whole loop, and you can move it all at once. And I'm going to do that just to even out these kind of areas of space for each face. It's good to have a kind of an even spread. This one here is not an edge loop, so I can't do that there. Oh, I've got a extrusion error here that I've got from earlier, so I'm just going to pull. No. Damn, see, so I've made that error that I told you not to make because I must have forgotten to pull something out at some point. So I'm just going to fix that by pulling that down. That's not ideal, but... So, there you go, error in action. Is there another one? No. Alright. Well, hopefully you haven't made an error like that. I'd have to go back in and kind of spread those out again a bit later. Anyway, I'll just explain what an edge loop kind of is. I'm just going to open Photoshop here. If we have, where's my, it's white. If we have some, say a face, some points here, that's the vertices, these are edges, creating a face. If we have a whole row, an edge loop will kind of cut along here. If, say, we had a loop that ended with a triangle, the edge loop would stop here. It would stop here. It wouldn't keep going because it doesn't calculate that there's a kind of a quad going there, so it will stop. And this is quite important. While we're modeling, we mostly use quads, but it'll also convert those into triangles when it goes into Unity. We don't want faces that are more than 4 sides, so we don't want to have a 5-sided face because Unity can't cut that into into 2 triangles, because if you remember geometry from high school maths, any kind of 4-sided shape can be cut into triangles by going down the diagonal. It can't do that to a multi-sided face. So just something to remember is we want to keep 4-sided faces when we're modeling, or 3-sided, you can use those, but don't make them more than that. And when we're making edge loops, it runs through these quads as long as they're running in a uniform kind of line, and it will stop if it finds a face that is any other kind of set of sides at the end. So that's kind of what an edge loop is. And we generally, when modeling, we want to keep everything kind of in those uniform loops. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're just going to sort of keep going. Edit mesh, extrude. Oops, see, I've just made an error by accidentally having all that selected. I only want these selected. I'm going to pull a head out. Edit mesh, extrude. It's given me 3. I can kind of turn this into a neck if I want to. It's going to be a very long-necked dog. Let's not call this a dog anymore. Let's call it, I don't know what it is. Some sort of 4-legged creature. And you just sort of keep going. It's not really any more complicated. It's just slowly shaping the form over time to give it some, to make it look a bit more organic. See that the sides are kind of okay. And I'm going to pull out a head. Control E to extrude. I don't want to have, I want to go into my extrude options box, and I just want to have one division for the moment. Pull that out. Now the temptation here is to scale it. That's a bad idea because it's crossing over the middle line. We just want to, so this is where it's like a little bit of a problem-solving task. If we want to scale this without scaling it over the middle, we have to select the edges and scale those. Oops. And move, not scale them, move them out, and we're going to have to do the same with the vertex afterwards. So I've got this really strange big face here. And now I'm going to show you another extrude tool, thing you can do with the extrude tool. Just select those two faces. I'm going to go edit mesh, going into the extrude options box, and I am going to have multiple divisions again, but this time I'm going to make sure that the divisions get smaller as they go outwards. So we're going to what's called taper the extrusion. At the moment it's 1, so everything is uniform, but if we make this a fraction of 1, let's say 0.5, it should get, no, excuse me, edit mesh extrude, we need to what have I done there? No curve selected or generated. Oh, okay, sorry, we can't do that yet. We just need to do the no curve. We'll just do that like normal, and then I'll just scale it to make it smaller instead. To give it a sort of a nozzle. Oops. Anyway, so if you wanted to then give it ears or something, you'd want to insert an edge loop. Edit mesh tools, insert edge loop. And then I might select a face, and I would edit mesh extrude to give it some ears, and I'll scale the ends, and Bob's your uncle. And I'm going to show you what I wanted to show you up here with the tail. So it's another extrude tool thing that you can do, and that is give a curve to the extrusion so that it follows a curve. So if I wanted to make a big curly tail, without sort of individually manipulating every piece, I would use a curve. So I'm going to go spacebar and go to the side view, and I'm going to go create curve tools, and you can use any of these tools, I think, but I'm going to use the Bezier curve, and I'm going to sort of just click here. I'm going to, like in Illustrator, make a silly tail. I'm going to go back up here, and I'm going to make an extrusion follow this curve that I feed the extrusion. So I'm going to go select my object. I'm going to select the face here, and I'm going to shift and select the curve. That's quite important, so make sure you're not selecting the object and then shift selecting the curve. You are selecting the face that you want the tail to be, then shift selecting the curve. It might even be around the other way. We'll just check in a second. We'll go edit mesh extrude, and we'll make sure to click on the options box here, and we're going to go curve settings, and we're going to go selected curve because we've selected this curve, and we are going to taper it so that it gets smaller as it runs along the curve. You can even twist it if you want it to be like a twisty kind of tail. We need to have more divisions because 3 kind of divisions won't be enough to approximate this whole shape. So let's give it a bigger number like 20, and let's see what happens. There we go. We've got a tail there, and there's a little bit of an error here because I probably just need to pull that out. If we just pull that out a bit, just to kind of clean that up. I'm not sure what's going on there. It's kind of squashed it up. Okay, what I can do is I can select the edge loops just to pull them out. This often happens. It might be running over itself. I'm just going to do it again. Often with Maya, if you're not exactly sure what's happened, just do it again. Undo everything and do it again. I'm going to move the tail further away to see if that helps. I'm going to select that face again. I want to do it on this object. And select that, and I'm going to go edit mesh, extrude, same settings, and it's much cleaner that time. The problem here, however, is that the 2 sides have run over each other. So if we just sort of fix that, if we just select all of those faces and just translate them out just to separate them for the moment, and we can fix up this later. Okay, so that's how you get a kind of a curve happening. Oops. Another thing you can do is, oops, what's going on here? F. I didn't tell you this before, but if you select a little component on the object, such as a single vertex, you can focus straight into whatever you've selected, just like you can focus on a whole object by pressing F. So I can click all over my object and press F to jump to different parts. Something else that's useful in making something look organic is to use if you ever stuck in a tool and you need to get back to selection, you can just click the arrow, by the way. But the selection tool actually has some options. If we go into Windows and we want settings, preferences, tool settings, it will appear either as a window. I kind of want to have it snapped into there. I just snap that back in there. The arrow tool itself has something called soft selection. You can turn that on, and that means that if you select a single selection, instead of only moving that selection, it moves everything else that's near the selection relative to it, based on a soft selection option. So this is going a bit much at the moment, so we're going to pull that right down. And you can see there's kind of a representation of how much the elements around the original selection will change based on that one, and it gives you kind of a goopy, blobby kind of way of more organically editing your mesh. I might even bring that down further. You see now what's happened is when I pressed W to move it, it moved me into the translate tool, which is also found here. I need to go back to the arrow tool to find that. It's down to 0.1, and that's a bit too small. 0.2. You can kind of, no, still not enough. 0.4. Yeah, I didn't want to move the middle bits, so you kind of play with that as you like. So if you're following this in my class, your homework will be to actually complete an animal or some sort of creature. It doesn't have to be four-legged, it can be eight-legged or whatever you like, as long as you show proficiency with these tools that I've been showing you for your homework. And now I'm just going to show you how to fix this up and prepare it so that it's one whole object. So you keep going, you keep going, you keep going. You can finish yours off more than I've finished off mine. But now we want to join the two objects back together. So we're going to go to object mode. And you see they're two separate objects at the moment. We need to just fix up what's happening in the middle. So just go here. Oops. We want to turn soft selection off now because and they don't have to be exactly touching. They just need to be close enough to each other. Just need to go in, and sometimes things like this in 3D get a little bit annoying and tricky. You just have to kind of deal with it. I'm going to just sort of do these until they're very close together. They don't have to be exactly touching, but they do need to be as close as possible. Now we have some crossover. Sometimes if you go to wireframe view, that's pressing 4 on the keyboard, you can see whether some lines across. Actually, that's just made it more confusing, but so 4 is for wireframe, 5 is for shaded, 6 is if we've got a texture on it. I'm just going to have 5 for the moment. Just give me a moment to fix. Come on, there we go. We just need to fix these up. And I'm pressing F for each of these just to help me there. That'll do for those, and then we want these as well. There's probably a better way. I just don't know what it is. Until they're all... well, a couple more. Tedious. But believe me, things in Maya get more tedious than this. And look, that'll do for the demonstration of that. The other thing we want to do is just make sure that object mode here, that there aren't any extra faces on the inside. Yes, and there are on the tail, so we just want to face select and just delete all of these extra faces that have appeared on the inside. Let's hit delete. I've accidentally deleted an extra one there, so unselect that one by shift clicking and delete those. And there's some on the head too. Oops, come on. Start again. There we go. I've probably just selected an outside one. Don't need to do the ear because they're not touching. Okay, we're good. We can delete that. And what you can even do is you can save half of this. You can just leave that over there, and you can, if you want to retain the original to work with, you can actually edit, duplicate special this again. Where is it? Duplicate special on the negative Z again, and leave that original over there if you want to come back to fixing this up again later, just to preserve that, because now we're going to kind of sew these two halves together. So at the moment they're separate objects. We're going to select both halves. We're going to go mesh, combine. Now they're counted as one object. However, they're still not joined in the middle. Oh, by the way, you can delete that curve if it's there. To tell whether they're joined, just go to the face select and double click a face. That will show you all of the faces that are connected together in a mesh. So at the moment it's showing us that these faces are not connected to those faces. We call that one shell, and this is another shell. We now want to combine the two shells. So we're going to select the whole object by going back to object mode, select the whole object, and go mesh, edit mesh. I'm looking for merge here. If you click on the options box, it'll show you something called threshold. This means, what merge means is it's going to take, let's just close that for a second. It's going to take, it's going to take vertices, say for example these two vertices at the top. It's going to find all vertices that are within a certain range of each other, and it'll basically make them the same vertice. It'll delete one of them and make them the same along the middle. So it's kind of sewing anything that's within a certain distance of each other together. So I'm just going to undo that. object, select the whole thing, edit mesh, merge. I'm going to just go with the default there and I'm going to go merge. And now if we select a face, double click, you can see they're all attached to each other, and because everything should have been close enough together in the tail, we shouldn't have any weird looking stuff in the tail now. We don't. It all looks good. Great. So that's a completed mesh ready to go into Unity. We'll also in a separate video learn how to add the animation bones to this mesh, but not in this video. We're also in the next video going to learn how to add the texture to the model. So we just need to, before we export it, we're just going to do something called delete the history. Because if you see here, if you see in the channel box in the inputs, there's a whole list of different things, and they have names like merge, unite, tweak, extrude. Those are all of the individual commands I've made on the object that are stored in its data structure, and that can confuse Unity in certain ways. It can cause little errors. So you want to kind of, I'm going to call it like baking it as it is, as we see it, without all of these inputs still affecting it. And to do that, we just select the whole object. We go edit, delete all by type history, and that deletes all of them, and then it's like what you see is what you get. There isn't any other information in here other than this mesh as it is. Another thing to think about is that this is quite a low polygon mesh. That's because we're working in real-time 3D. We're not working in, we're not kind of just animating frames. So we want to have as interesting looking a character without making it too detailed, so that our computer can actually calculate all the changes that are made to the 3D objects in real time and all the physics and everything without, so there's not too much information there for it to do that on every frame of the game or whatever we're making. So now just with the object selected, go File, again like we did in the last tutorial, export the selection as an FBX export. I'm going to put it in Tutorial Project, Assets, Meshes, and I'm going to call it Strange Creature, and just save that out. And you can see now I've got my strange creature here. I can drop it in, and there it is. On the import settings, I'm going to set the scale factor to be 100 and apply, and then it will just be bigger when it comes in. That was on, sorry, so that you see that again, that was just, I clicked on the original file, and in its import settings I changed its scale factor to 100, just to compensate for the difference of scale between Maya and Unity. And you see that it has its kind of geometric look. The only way to make it smooth, so instead of using like number 2 here, remember I pressed number 2 to make it look smooth, the closest thing you can do in Unity without adding a plugin or something, I guess, is to go to the import settings down here, and on normals go calculate and change the smoothing angle up and go apply, and then it kind of fakes the smoothing look, even though if you actually look at its geometry you can see that it's still hard edged. It's smoothed the way the light reacts to the object, and I'll explain normals in a different video. Okay? Let me just think, is there anything else? We'll just save the project. So you want to save your scene, and that saved it to that Maya binary file that I saved in my first project outside of the project folder. I think that's all we need for now. Yes, so just in the next video it will be UV mapping, which is how we add texture to the object. Alright, thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.